Καλώς ήρθατε στο podcast της Marketing Greece. Εδώ ενώνουμε δυνάμεις με όλους και αναλύουμε, συζητάμε, προτείνουμε, εμπνεούμαστε και συνεχίζουμε όλοι μαζί για τον ελληνικό τουρισμό.
Hello and welcome to another Marketing Greece podcast. I'm Nikos Diamantopoulos, General Manager of Marketing Greece, and today we're honored to host Randy Durband. He is the CEO of the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, a non-profit organization that establishes and manages global standards for sustainable travel and tourism. As a proud member of GSTC ourselves, as Marketing Greece, today we're going to explore sustainability values, case studies, and the future. Hello, Randy. Welcome, and thank you very much for being here.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me. Nice to be here.
So, Randy, let's introduce our audience to your mission. How exactly does GSTC influence global tourism practices?
Well, we do so in a few ways. First of all, by managing global standards. And we consider the GSTC standards as truly global for two reasons. That we start with the UN Foundation, that we follow UN definitions from the SDGs as to what sustainability means in any sector. Secondly, we develop and maintain and manage the standards with an incredibly inclusive process. We spend a full year creating new standards, and we spend nearly a year revising them occasionally every 5 or 6 years or so. So they're truly global standards recognized as such. And there's really no other standards that exist that kind of go through that inclusive process.
I can only imagine the difficulty of the method that you're using to evaluate and all the work that you've done with the inclusive process that you're following in order to finalize the standards. Because I was looking at the method that you're using for the new standards on the gastronomy and the F&B industry, and was, I can only imagine how difficult it could be to go through all this process, but it's the right way. So I suppose that the result is rewarding for you, and that's the only way to standardize the process.
I think it adds credibility is the main thing. We're non-political. We're operating all over the world, literally. So it's not about culture. It's not about politics. And so I think even if the end result would be similar to a small committee in one culture, even if that's the case, it still has more credibility by having gone through all these consultations and all this inclusion from cultures and political systems all over the world. So the credibility is key.
Yeah, of course. So Greece is located in the Mediterranean, a geographical region that is experiencing, I'd say quite intensely, the consequences of climate change. Therefore, designing a sustainability strategy around adaptation and mitigation scenarios is both very challenging, but also a necessity. What's your insight on this?
Well, adaptation and mitigation of climate change is very specific to location, So, it's still a big, diverse world in terms of, geography. So those solutions, I think, are often very specific to the case. But yet, our work is a little bit more involved in the operational aspects of things. Our standards really relate to existing operations, not site selection and so forth, but it's the operation of existing things. So I think where adaptation and mitigation overlap with our work would be in our destination standards. We're very concerned about overcrowding. I know you want to talk about that. And I think that, dispersing the visitor over the course of the year and time of day are really critical to that. We don't really have expertise to talk about what this location in Greece might do to mitigate. Again, it's very specific to location, but there are some universal principles in terms of managing visitor flows that I think that come from our standard and our work very, very effectively.
That would be my focus on the next question, because we often hear about overcrowded destinations, overrepresentation of specific landmarks and sites in terms of tourism flows. We have seen a backlash against tourism the last few years in major destinations, also in Greece a little bit. And I was wondering if you can share with us some successful case studies of destinations turning that around or finding solutions that worked, and maybe some that found solutions that thought they would work but failed, because we can learn from those as well.
Yeah, there are case studies. There are things that have worked in the world. One that comes to mind for me always is that it was about 25 years ago, the Granada in Spain, home to the Alhambra. It's that Alhambra Palace is the big draw, right? That's what people come to Granada for. And they put in a timed entry program, which was rather radical and new for the time. At that time, I was on the board of directors of the European Tour Operators Association, and so we were talking to our membership all over Europe about this. And by the way, I think it's important for the public sector to always hear this message. Our members in the private sector were not at all upset or anything like that and negative about the timed entry. They just felt like, we need more advance notice.
Yeah.
When the public sector changes something, they need to give the private sector at least a year, if not 18 months, because they're taking advance bookings. So anyway, it was a great success story because that timed entry makes the palace experience better. But there's a second impact, I think, to the entire community, is that because most visitors going for the palace have that timed entry to that iconic site, I think the data supports this. The visitors, and I've been there a couple times myself to see it, visitors are doing more before and after. They have to go get their position.
They're more organized.
They're more organized, and I think the entire community benefits from, and that's a big piece of the overcrowding. It's not just alleviate the crowding in the one place that everybody wants to see, but how does the visitor spend more time and money with more attractions, more districts and so forth. So that's one success. Another success that I like is a small village in the south of France. And it's mostly known for, it's not really known internationally. It's called Saint-Guillaume-de-la-Désert. It's in the nestled, a little village in the valley in the mountains of the south of France. And they had a problem where in their little village, that people would visit for charm of the architecture and the setting. On the weekends in the summer, just absolutely crowded. There's no place to move your car. Residents were annoyed, right? And their solution was very clever and very effective. They invested money by outside of town. I forget the distance. I'm thinking maybe about 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers. They developed a lovely parking area with good public restroom facilities, and then they developed a walking path and a bicycle path and clean energy shuttle bus. So you could choose. You jump, get on the bus, or you walk, or you bicycle.
So the center of the village was...
The center of the village was reserved only for people with a license plate that are residents who are permitted to enter. And, so everything just changed because now it's not overly crowded. Now it's more charming. What the visitors came to see is more available and apparent, that the whole setting, improved. And then the visitors there for longer, the visitor have a better experience just while they're hiking or biking on the bus. They see more of the sense of the overall place.
Happier, I suppose.
Yeah. So now that required an investment, and but the outcome is so great, that the money was certainly worth it. At a larger scale, my mind always goes to China. I visited many destinations in China. And I think the Western world could learn a lot more from the East than it's aware of. Because think about it, East Asia has had greater population density than the Western world and Europe for more than 1,000 years. They know how to handle a crowd, right?
Yeah, they know how to manage.
And there's a couple of things that I think I've seen in many locations there that they do very well. They have advanced technology monitoring. Not just having cameras, but, they're just really monitoring the entrance flows to heritage sites and this and that. Monitor. I've just seen I've had behind-the-scenes tours of these rooms, these massive screens where they have all this information. And so, you can't manage until you really, have the information. Yeah, so that's one good thing. But something else they do that's interesting is that at crowded places, whether it's in cities or at a heritage site or a natural site, they create new activities for people to do. Sometimes Westerners like to, call those kind of like silly heritage recreations. But so what? You got to create something. I mean, for example, there's this in the city of Lashan, there's this giant Buddha that people visit. Well, they created this huge cave network. And it's made to look like it's old, but it's not. It's just this new creation. And, you could criticize that as it's like, well, it's not heritage. Well, so what? Now those visitors spend time walking through that, and they're not all spending their time crowding around the iconic thing they came to see. And if they've got whole districts and cities that replicate old architecture and so forth, but that's what the crowds do. And I just, people ask me all the time, how do we escape mass tourism? How do we get rid of mass tourism? And my response is, well, where will the masses go?
Yeah.
I mean, we have to create experience for people, and we have to disperse them. So that whole aspect of creating some more features that a lot of people will go to. They'll still go to the iconic places, but hopefully they go to the iconic places for a little bit less time, and because they're kind of dispersed. So those are a couple things that come to mind.
Yeah, these three examples, I think that they're the definition of management, because the time slot approach, the enriching the product approach, which you said about the cave network, and it's what we're preaching, and the measurement is very important, as you've said, the data. So and what you've said about the East and China, I think Europe is a little bit behind in that sense of measuring and monitoring, but I think they're getting there. So it's very important. Let's go to synergies. Synergies and partnerships are part of Marketing Greece's core values. How important is the collaboration between the local authorities or the DMOs, the DMMOs, whatever you want to call them, local communities, the residents of the destination, and the private sector, the businesses, all the stakeholders there, in building a sustainable tourism strategy?
Well, it's very important, and I think the acronym is important. Whether you call it DMO, DMMO, is extremely important, because traditionally DMO is Destination Marketing Organization, right? And now many destinations are changing the M from marketing to management, or the DMMO. Obviously, you know it. You just used it. Both M's, management and marketing.
I've seen also the development. Sometimes there.
Yeah.
2 M's and a D.
Well, I think what has really been lacking historically has been the development and the management. I mean, globally, I'm not picking on Greece or any place in particular. It was a global phenomenon that basically the public sector viewed its role as marketing and promotion of tourism, and the private sector just sort of takes care of it. And so the explosion of demand, of the fall of communism and the opening of China and the Asian tigers, it's not just China, but the growing middle classes from so many other Asian countries. It's just created a huge, growth of demand in the last 10 years. COVID aside, the overall trend is shocking growth of demand. And so the whole world was not prepared for it, to have these kinds of numbers. So now it's, of course, there's this big shift from people talk about the quality of tourism and not the numbers and so forth. Still, we count the numbers.
Yeah. And we should.
You should. And that, to me, that's the right starting point. But then you should go on to many other factors and don't stop there.
Other KPIs.
Exactly, other KPIs. But I think what has traditionally been lacking was indeed management and development. But there are many DMOs in the world that are still having this discussion to say, maybe we should have management and development. It's still a pretty new phenomenon, and there's not a lot of experience. And so that's a problem around the world.
Also in terms of governance, there's no, one-size-fits-all solution in the governance of these organizations, let's say.
But I think what we see from a sustainability standpoint is, and we define sustainability very broadly, because our standards, again, based on UN definition of sustainability that goes beyond just environmental issues to include social issues, cultural heritage preservation, and so forth. We see as vital. I can condense what I want to say into talking about on our destination standard criterion A1 says that a destination should have some kind of council, whatever word works in your language and political system, some kind of group that, clearly it's going to be the Department of Tourism that convenes, but it really has to have three other groups involved. One, it has to be whole government. It can't be just the Department of Tourism. The tourism people have to talk to transport and to investment and to vocational schools to, educate the right skills level for where we're going with our tourism offering. So it's got to be a whole government approach. And if the Department of Tourism cannot get the cooperation from the others, well, then you got to go up, from the head of your department that talks to whoever, the mayor, the city council, whoever it is, that goes horizontal and tries to get the others on board. Because you simply cannot manage the visitor economy without a whole government approach where others, other agencies are at least aware of the needs and the concerns, and they can fuse together the visitor economy needs of the resident economy. So that first of all, you need that whole government approach. Second of the three is that group needs to reach out to the private sector in a meaningful way. And it needs to reach to the community in a meaningful way. And so what we believe and what we've seen work is that if you have regular meetings of some kind of council, again, whatever name works in your culture and your language, but they meet regularly, they take good notes, and they have honest discussion about, here's what we heard last meeting, we're working on this, good progress on this one, not so good on this one, but here's why. And that over time, trust is developed across all those lines, and it becomes a cooperative effort. If you do that once, it's just a complaint session. Yeah. If you do that in a recurring way, then again, you build trust over time. If there's a good process where everybody in the room understands there's a genuine effort to improve, and some things cannot be fixed. Some things cannot be fixed quickly, but we're all working on it, and we're in this together. To us, that's the magic formula. You can't fix all the elements in our standard, if you don't have the right governance and the right mechanism and people aren't on board. So it's interesting to me. There are very few good global awards. Actually, there's really nothing global on sustainability at the moment. We had in the past WTTC, Tourism for Tomorrow Awards, and they had Destination Stewardship category. The last three winners of that award, the judges commented upon, they've got these organizations where there's all this, stakeholder engagement. And so that really helped them be successful. All three of those were GSTC members that had councils in place.
Okay, who won?
The last one was St. Kitts and Nevis in the Caribbean. The one before that was Thompson Okanagan region of British Columbia in Western Canada. And the one before that was Botswana Tourism Organization. Three very different parts of the world, three different cultures, three different political and economic systems. But that was the common bond, is that they had good stakeholder engagement. And that's not what they were putting in their applications as foremost. They were talking about some programs and some development they had that they were proud of. And the partnership was
complementary, let's say.
But in all three cases, the judges picked up on the fact that a critical success factor was there was good stakeholder engagement to make this happen.
Yeah.
Well, like Canada, can I use that as an example? That
of course.
Thompson Okanagan region of British Columbia, very interesting development. They made a decision 10 or 12, 15 years ago, whenever it was, to, instead of spending 100% of the money allocated purely to marketing and promotion, that they would allocate 60% of that money to development and 40% to marketing and promotion. They concluded after, 3-4 years, whatever, that their marketing and promotion was more effective because what they were doing in an organized way to develop product and refine it, improve it, was so effective that, from marketing, travel, and tourism, I've been in travel and tourism for 40 years. I was largely a tour operator for a quarter of a century. And one thing I've learned in those 40 years, the power of marketing, travel, and tourism comes from referrals and repeats, right? And what people write online and reviews. So visitor satisfaction is everything. Yeah. Customer acquisition is expensive. You want people to come back themselves. You want them to tell their family and friends. And if they like an experience, they talk about it, for 6 months back in the workplace. If they don't like something, they share. If they don't like it, they talk about it for 2 years or forever.
Yeah,
So satisfaction is everything. Exactly. So, when you, just have better product delivery, better experiences, that's your marketing.
Yeah.
And so this shift is really working.
And we often forget that marketing has to do with product development as well. It's the first step, and we often forget it, and we only think about promotion. But we as well as Marketing Greece, because we're fostering collaboration in the destinations between local authorities, private enterprises, other stakeholders and stuff like that. And it's very difficult to, set a table, let's sit and, have a common vision, have some common goals, because it's very difficult because always someone has different interests. And the way that you can communicate the destination and its products, it's very important. It's a part of management. It's a little bit connected in our mind. So last September, the SETE, the Greek Tourism Confederation, which is our main shareholder, launched Metron, a voluntary self-assessment and verification initiative to encourage the tourism sector to engage and to make more sustainable choices and investments. At the same time, GSTC is part of its stewardship board that they created. What's your perception on the balance between obligation on one part and self-commitment on the other part, on sustainability? Is it realistic to believe that self-assessment is one way forward?
Yeah, we believe very strongly and passionately in self-assessment. Before you get an external review, you really need to do self-assessment, because otherwise you're throwing some money out the window. If you do an honest self-assessment, where you're really just truly honest with yourselves and, identify what we're doing well and what we need to improve upon, then if you bring somebody from the outside and they point out what you need to improve on, then you've got to now spend money and time to fix it. Well, just fix it organically in the first place. So, yeah, we believe passionately, in self-assessment. We also think that before you would ever mandate something, you give guidance. Don't just have some kind of mandate from the public sector, but first you provide guidance on saying, hey, here's the direction we want to go at this destination. Here's how sustainability works. Here's what you need to do. It's training, awareness raising, workshops, and self-assessments. They all tie together. Training, self-assessments, but guidance and then communication of vision. And I think that when people see the vision, they buy in on sustainability. How can you argue with social justice and making our destination better and making the visitors happier and stakeholder engagement and so forth? We also see globally, I think there's a demographic shift that's happening faster than people understand. People 35 years and younger are not very happy with the planet they're inheriting. And I think they're more prone to action. So that's a good thing for a more sustainable world. We're moving entirely too slowly in the green transition globally. But I do have some hope that, the younger generations will reach some tipping point as more of them become 40 and 45. They retain that passion and we impact more change. And I think older leaders need to understand this shift that the clientele do really want it. So first of all, before we would ever mandate something, it's teach, train, express vision, provide self-assessment tools, and try to make that all as voluntary as possible. And I just feel like when people engage at that level, they see the light, and mandatory requirements are less necessary. If you start with mandatory, you just get natural resistance. Humans push back.
Yeah.
If you force me to do something before I understand it, I'll just argue and I'm going to push back. So first convert them.
Yeah, but
softly.
It's very difficult converting.
It is difficult. Yeah. It's all difficult.
but you made a good argument, a good business case about the future travelers, because that can make their mind go there. You know, in 10 years' time, today's 30-year-olds would be 40-year-olds. They would have they would travel a lot more than now. So you have to make a business decision.
Yeah, I think so. And there's two things I would respond to that. Is that one is that training doesn't need to be expensive. They're just, doing some self-education and kind of learning what the issues are. I mean, food waste is a major contributor to greenhouse gases. People often think about, how do I reduce carbon emissions, greenhouse gases? Oh, I have to convert my old building or my vehicles or whatever. Yes, you should do those things. But food waste just changes. There's no capital investment. You just learn how to, improve your process of how much food do I produce and put out and serve. And there's tremendous cost savings and greenhouse gas savings. So there's things like that sustainability doesn't have to cost money.
Yeah.
But also sustainability does cost money in conversion of buildings or vehicles. Oh my God, the prices of all of that have come down dramatically in recent years. Technologies have improved so much that I think a lot of business people don't realize what is available that I can do inexpensively or free of charge. So that's one thing. Another thing is, I would encourage all of your listeners to go online, and it's easily found, 3 pieces of good market research on the global travelers' attitudes towards sustainability. The changes are profound. The most recent one comes from Trip.com, and then 2 just before that from Booking.com. So these large OTAs who are distributing product.
We should listen to them.
We should listen to them because they're listening. They're studying what the customer is thinking. All 3 of these very recent studies, and they're all good studies. One of them at Booking.com, I know, is 32 countries and 33,000 people, very systematic, good sampling, of travelers. And so across cultures, there is the results of these surveys are profound. High percentage of people from all cultures they want more sustainable travel options. 53% said they're annoyed when the supplier isn't green enough. Wow. I mean, whoever would have thought? I mean, 10 years ago, I just can't imagine, some of the numbers we see. So I encourage people to read those things because it's really happening. And so many times we hear business people say, well, nobody asks for sustainability. And I would argue this, and I draw upon my own 40 years of mostly selling travel before I switched to a nonprofit talking about sustainability, is that, at point of purchase, people are fixed on price, and so the whole internet model is the psychology of booking is price fixed. I get that. But if you're missing out on where the satisfaction is going because you're not paying attention to this market research and you're not even asking questions in satisfaction about green where people can express their feelings, well, now you're missing something because society is changing. Climate change is hitting society in the face, and there is changes. So I would encourage business people to learn about those things that are inexpensive or free to improve upon, and learn about the shift in the travelers' attitudes.
You would turn down the argument that they say that, no, I'm not seeing this. I'm not seeing that travelers make their choices based on what I'm doing as a business on the sustainability part.
Yeah, I'm saying I don't think they're making initial choices based much on sustainability. I acknowledge that. What I am saying is that once they get there, they get to the destination, they enter the hotel, more and more they're feeling like, what's all this single-use plastic doing here? That's getting to be old-fashioned. You look kind of old-fashioned if you're still using single-use plastic. You're not upgraded, so, And oh my God, I mean, the Asian visitor, I mean, we see in many Asian hotel brands, single-use plastic is just going away. And customers adjust. And that's another thing is that, the business people think, oh, they don't want to change. Well, no, people change. And they're changing more quickly than you may realize. So, yeah, so I would, I acknowledge that at point of purchase. An example I like to give on that is that Lufthansa Airlines and United Airlines, Germany and the U.S., in both cases, they made it easy on their websites after you book the flight to click through and add a carbon offset. And less than 1% of people do.
Yeah, I'm not sure that carbon offsets work.
Well, there's that issue, but even regardless of that issue, just doing something, people at point of purchase, they're just, I've got my price, I've got my dates, I'm excited. That's the psychology of it, right? Yeah. I'm not thinking about plastic water bottles, and I'm not thinking about energy consumption of air conditioning.
If they get a plastic bottle of water in the reception of the hotel, they would think that, plastics?
Exactly.
Single-use plastics.
And a room that's preset at 19 degrees, when I get into the room and I just turn the aircon off because it's so uncomfortable, I mean, those things happen. It's annoying. Green people can't be as green as they want to be. I don't know if you... I'd like to share with you a remarkable thing that's happening in Turkey, if you want to hear.
Yeah, of course.
So I think this is very interesting for your neighbor country. And I've studied history too, so I know about attitudes. But Turkey in 2022 launched a program where by 2030, every hotel in the country will be legally mandated to go for our full certification. Now, normally we wouldn't, be supportive of such a mandate, but they put it together with a training program. We helped train trainers. There's just an army of trainers going out training hotels, large and small, even in the countryside, in the Turkish language on sustainability, all at modest cost structure. And they've got a stepwise program where by August of last year, every hotel had to show compliance to 30% of our standard. And then by end of next year, they have to show compliance to 70%. Then 2030, 100%, but with a deep, rigorous certification. Why did your neighbor country do this? They haven't said it explicitly, but, I've interacted with them, and I suspect this. Knowing that their core clientele of the Western and Northern European leads the world in society's concern for sustainability, that deep down this is what they want, even at point of click and point of purchase. They don't ask for it or say deep down they want that, so let's give that to them strongly. I think they're future proofing their product.
What we said earlier.
Exactly. Give deep down, people want it. And I'd also just challenge your listeners to think about this. If you're a parent and you want your children to eat good, healthy food, do you read all the labels for every product you buy in the supermarket?
Not so much.
No. None of us. Nobody does, right? We all say, I should do more. No matter how motivated you are. Even a person who does a lot says, I should do more.
Yeah, of course.
We don't do that. We're busy with our lives. So anything we purchase, we may not be as motivated at point of purchase to really look deeply on health, hygiene, sustainability, anything. But when we get it and think about what we should repurchase and this and that, we do think about those things. Mm-hmm. And again, I go back to that message. Well, so I think the Turks are just wise to say, this is what people really want. And we put together a program that's manageable and affordable, and let's give it to them.
Yeah, it's a more forward-looking approach, and it's working. And I have to make a note here about the training and the workshop argument that you've done, and because it would be the first step, starting the conversation, starting to engage the SMEs, which is the difficult audience in order to engage with sustainability practices. And training and workshops indeed do not cost so much. So we, as well as Marketing Greece, who have engaged in the workshops in destinations in sustainability, and we can see that even raising the awareness, starting the conversation, having the discussion with the local stakeholders, it's the first step of a big journey. We all know it, but maybe sometimes the first step is the hardest one. As the CEO of GSTC, and as you've said, you have 40 years of experience in tourism. Where do you see sustainability in tourism, sustainable tourism going in the next few years? I want to see your eyes on the future. Are we going to be okay?
Yes and no, and I don't know.
honestly, as Randy.
I think this. I think that aviation is the Achilles heel of travel and tourism. It cannot move fast enough to a green transition on fuels. It's very much tied to fossil fuels in the foreseeable future. Mm-hmm. There's research done on sustainable aviation fuel. It's very controversial because to even create the biomass or the used oil or whatever creates some carbon emissions just to produce them. Is it hydrogen or whatever? The industry hasn't come together to figure out where they're going. So they're not close to really conversion. But they are no more than 35 or 40% of the carbon emissions for all of travel and tourism. And the good news, where I'm optimistic and feeling good, is that everything we do on land and water in a hotel with land transport, at attractions, can be greener yesterday at decreasing cost. You look at what the automobile production has changed. My God, there's EVs coming out of China for $10,000.
Yeah.
And they're quality.
That's not good for European economy, though.
It's not good for the Germans and the American car makers, but that's
another story. That's another podcast.
That's just part of the story anyway, because generally speaking, all automobile makers, bus makers, everybody are moving quite rapidly to green energy transport vehicles at lower and lower costs.
Are they moving rapidly enough?
Oh, it's quite rapid, I think. Yeah. I mean, we should have all done this all 20 years ago, but now that there's movement on that front, on vehicles, it's suddenly become very rapid. And so I think, a destination should require land transport. Give a 5-year plan to say, next time you replace buses or next vehicle's replaced, nothing new can be anything but green, starting a certain date, and give an advance, warning. So rental cars and local buses and so forth can be done. Hospitality can do so much more on sustainability in terms of managing aircon. And again, we come back to the single-use plastic bottles. There's big progress on that. Major hotel brands now have wall-mounted shower shampoo instead of the little reusable or non-reusable mini bottles and the water bottles. There's big movement on that. But, you come back to education. Most hoteliers don't know. It's now cheaper to, on-site, have glass water bottles or some other material, but not refillable, and sanitize those bottles and purify water and package it on site is now cheaper than buying plastic in most locations. People don't know this.
That should be part of the education process.
It's part of education, exactly. Yeah. So I'm optimistic now about the rapid change in technologies, and we're now starting to see some more, changes in process. So I'm optimistic on land and water, and we need them to be super green. Because I think I used the reference, the Achilles heel, and I truly believe that because did you hear about the flight shame movement that began in Nordic countries before COVID?
I've heard that.
It might come back. COVID killed it.
In Central Europe, I think in Holland, in the Netherlands, I think they were urging the travelers not to use flights for less than 300 kilometers.
Exactly. So in continental Europe, that works where there's a rail network, but in Greece, you need people to fly in because you don't have the quick rail.
Dependent.
Exactly. So that's a problem. So that perception that I feel guilty flying, that's a major problem for Greece. So to my mind, the best way to counteract that is to be extremely green when they get here. Because you can. It's more affordable. We just need better education. We need targets. We need plans.
Incentives for businesses to proceed to these investments.
So where I have optimism is that if DMOs and national governments take all this to heart and businesses take it to heart to say, we can, we should, we must convert what we do on land on water. Even if we can't fix aviation, we'll do what we can. And then we can promote our destination or our business as super green. And then those people who feel guilty about getting on an airplane will feel a little bit better and maybe come more often.
When they land.
Yes.
Okay, that's a very optimistic view. And I'd like to close this episode with this view. Thank you very much, Randy. All your insights were eye-opening. And I think our viewers would be very inspired with what you said. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
Σας ευχαριστούμε για την ακρόαση. Ακολουθήστε μας στα social media και προτείνετε μας και εσείς θεματολογία για τα επόμενα podcast. Ο τουρισμός μας αφορά όλους. Στο επανειδήν.